We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 124. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Paul Zimmerman. Today, we discuss working remotely and the impacts of the coronavirus and the impending zombie apocalypse on archaeology. Let's get to it. All right, welcome everybody to the Archaeotech Podcast. Paul, are you remaining virus-free?
I am, and I think my computers are. How about you?
So far, so good. It is, as we're recording this, since time is really of the essence right here, and if you're listening to this in the future or even on the release day, things are changing rapidly, and it's March 12th as Paul and I were recording this. And it's actually 2 days later than we normally record. We normally record on a Tuesday. This is a Thursday. And the reason we're recording on a Thursday is because at the last minute, and we were trying all day, but at the last minute, our planned guest, which we hope to get on again sometime in the future, but couldn't do it because the people that were also coming on with this guest, the primary guest, said that the guest was locked away in Italy and they couldn't get a hold of him. They've since gotten a hold of him, so he's okay.
Okay, that's good.
They know he's fine. For one reason or another, they couldn't get a hold of him. And for anybody listening to this in the future, Italy, I think a few days before that, went on total lockdown because of the coronavirus. Like they've closed all the borders. There's no in or out unless there's special circumstances. And that doesn't mean there's no internet in or out. So when they said, hey, he's on quarantine in Italy, might have to reschedule the interview, I was like, well, the internet still works. But then they're like, no, we can't find him. So
yeah, we have a lot of friends and family members that live in Italy, and we were getting bits of information out from them, and it's been pretty grim, pretty hectic for them, very disorienting, and with an edge of unsafeness to it. Is that a word?
Yeah,
it should be a word.
I think so. Yeah. So Paul had a good idea of basically pivoting this topic, and we came up with another day, and we're just recording this a few days late, but to basically talk about working under these conditions. I think while this is somewhat of I don't want to say a one-off because it could happen again, something like this, but this is really making people think about working remotely and working in general, right? Like what kinds of things are changing and impacting people because of this. For example, my co-working facility, as I mentioned, that I have the studio out here, literally just sent out an email to all the members of the co-working facility today that are said, all of our classes, I teach an introduction to podcasting class. All classes from here on out are canceled until further notice. And they're contracting with their janitorial facility to do deeper cleanings on the whole building. Nobody here has been diagnosed as far as we know, but they're taking precautionary measures to do that. And I've got to start thinking, okay, well, do I have to have like all my stuff with me in case they decide to just close the building and I can't get in because I have my podcasting gear, I have all that other stuff that I'm going to want to take with me and do from home, if that's the case. And I think people like you, Paul, you've been affected by this dramatically, and you're now working from home for who knows how long, right?
Yeah. Quite specifically, I've said many times, I work at a K through 12 in Manhattan, and starting about a week ago, we started getting certain teachers or other individuals at the school who had to be quarantined, not because they themselves had been exposed, but because they had a child that goes to a school where somebody might have been exposed. So,
right.
Really with an abundance of caution, but certain people have been dropping out over the last, I don't mean dropping out like dropping dead. I just mean dropping out and self-quarantining for the last week. And then we're recording this on a Thursday evening, East Coast time here. I've spent the last 2 days at home because our buildings have been closed because there's a member of our community who is currently being tested for the COVID virus. Mm-hmm. And so next week, we're going to go on 2 weeks of spring break. So the administration made a decision end of the day on Tuesday that spring break was starting for the students a couple days early, and there was no school on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and nobody was allowed in the building. It was going to just be Wednesday while they did a deep cleaning, but I guess we've got 3 different buildings spread out across a couple different blocks in Manhattan, so it was a lot of work, and I guess they needed more time. So Wednesday and Thursday, we've been working from home, telepresence and professional development, and trying to get teachers up with all the different technologies that they might need for teaching classes in the future. remotely. So so we have a lot of experience really fast here. I mean, we had plenty of experience beforehand, but we have a lot of direct experience right now of how we actually, as a community, as a school community, are dealing with it. And I just want to like take my personal experience so far, things that I've seen that work, things I think haven't worked, and then also try to maybe broaden this discussion to just see a little more what we might expect this now global pandemic to what its impact might be on archaeology as we go, through the spring and into the summer.
Yeah, and that's totally true. Let's talk about archaeology and field schools and stuff, because that's one of the things I was thinking about just today, because a number of California universities, and I want to say the whole UC system here soon, is going on full remote and full remote status for teachers and for students. And they say they're not shutting classes down, but teachers are scrambling to figure out how to do remote lessons. And the interesting thing to me about that is it's like, you can still give your lectures. I mean, if it's a lab, yeah, you're kind of screwed. But if you can still give lectures remotely, but I don't think the infrastructure is there, like built in, ready to go, with all the licenses and everything in place to like turn on Zoom or Skype or something like that and teach a class of 20 to 200 people on a subject, right? And have them all tune in at the same time, because certain things you can't control, like do all the students have access to internet that will allow video conferencing, right? At that level, do all the students even have the software on their computers to do that? Do they know how to use the programs? Is there a way to message all the students and say, hey, we're still meeting at the same time, but we're going to do it over this, click on this link to do that? Is all that in place? It doesn't sound like it is.
No,
it doesn't sound like that was even thought of. Yeah,
it certainly isn't, and that's actually what I find kind of interesting. I've got my niece, who lives right next door to us here, is a student at NYU. My daughter is a student, freshman this year at Skidmore. She is on. My daughter is on spring break, so she's visiting her cousin in London right now.
Oh man!
So we'll see if we actually get her back when she's supposed to come back in a couple days. But so we've got this. Skidmore only made their decision today. NYU made their decision a few days back, but apparently didn't have much in the way of preparations made beforehand. We saw the writing on the wall, and now fortunately we're a much smaller institution. We've got about 100 students per grade, so roughly 1,300 students and about 300 faculty and staff that we had to accommodate. So it's a manageable number. Most of the students have school-issued computers that they are not administrators of, so we have all the software under control on their computers. So we could anticipate what our community's needs were going to be and how we could approach it, and then try to quickly research how we were going to do things like telepresence and what the best methods of different kinds of communication were going to be. But from what I've seen from the colleges that I have any kind of direct experience with, it's really a grab bag, I'm a little worried for the chances of success that some of these schools are going to have. I think that it's going to be pretty grim for a lot of students. But we'll see. Like I said, at our school, we spent the last couple days not allowed to go into the building. So we took the opportunity as a school community, the divisional directors, the department heads, us in IT, trying to come up with plans of what technologies we could use, make sure everybody could get up on them, make sure all the passwords and logins and everything worked, making sure licensing was straightened out, getting enough usable experience with these different tools that we in IT could then support as in a reasonable fashion any of our teachers as they're actually trying to use it. And then we're also lucky that we go for 2 weeks of spring break. So that gives everybody a chance to catch their breath, think how they're going to revise their lesson plans and go into it. But yeah, I've seen a total variety of different responses from very well thought out and anticipating the needs and working like we do from a place of actually strength to ones that are just absolutely reactive and running around like chickens with their heads cut off because they don't really know what they were planning to do because they don't really have any experience with it.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I just saw a news report this morning talking about the lifespan of the virus. Apparently a really good report came out that's credible. I can't cite the source. I don't remember what it was. I was just watching NBC News. And but But they basically said that, from a cleaning standpoint, yes, I mean, obviously everybody needs to keep everything clean, but the virus on most hard surfaces will only live for about 3 hours in the open air. And I mean, obviously if it's on your hands or something, it'll live longer because of the warmth and just the living environment of a person. And in cardboard, which is another weird example, I guess it's just one thing they test, it lives for about 24 hours, give or take. Now that a lot of environmental factors are at play there, but that's in general, in their testing at 24 hours. So that tells me cardboard is a very porous thing. So I guess the harder it gets, probably the less amount of time the virus is going to live, because there's fewer pockets for like warm air and things like that allow viruses to live. So I'm not a medical professional, but what that tells me is that all these deep cleaning measures and things like that could probably just be mitigated by having people just wipe down their desk with a Lysol wipe, or spray it with some, something with bleach in it and something like that. And in fact, I saw somebody post on Facebook earlier today. They said all these people that have been doing, for years have been doing DIY home cleaners and make it yourself, soaps and sanitizers, switch to Clorox real quick. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's just keeping things clean like that. And then going back to the, people congregating and being near each other, they're calling it social distancing, of course, which is, staying away from other people, because that's what helps transmit something like this and keep it going through the system. And it's not going to live forever, which means if we keep each other separate and we don't do these gatherings, most major sporting events have been canceled for the next month or two. And we'll talk about field schools and stuff like that in a minute, because I think that's going to be impacted in a different way. But go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, no. So I don't want to be overly alarmist, but I wonder if they check cardboard specifically because of how much stuff is shipped in cardboard.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wonder if that's going to have any impact on everybody's Amazon orders, because I've been seeing a lot of those lately. I think from people who are stocking up on things but afraid to go to the stores.
Well, yeah, and a lot of our stuff, because the president shut down travel between Europe and the United States yesterday,
right,
as we're recording this. But what they didn't shut down was the travel of goods between those countries. I noticed that specifically. It's just people. Mm-hmm. And I had a package delivered today, and I had one delivered yesterday. And, when your package is sitting in that UPS facility or wherever it is, can the virus be transmitted cardboard to cardboard? You know what I mean? Like if a person had it, touched a package, and then that package touched another package, and in that 24-hour span went into my hands, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Again, I don't want to be alarmist, but it is something to consider, when you're talking about this stuff. So who knows?
The important rule there, I think, is just what we've been told is, wash your hands a lot, and try to resist touching your face, which for me is absolutely impossible. I realize with all these teleconferences that I always have my hands on my forehead, my hands on my chin. I'm always cradling my head somehow when I'm talking. So I'm screwed.
I do a lot of similar things. Yeah, me too. So.
Actually, I did want to circle back a little bit to what I was saying about the different tools, and we can talk a little bit more about tools later, but you have hammered this point a number of times about like knowing your equipment, knowing your software before you go into the field.
Yeah.
Right. Knowing what to expect, how it works, how you save things, how you record things, what the ins and outs are. That we're really seeing, what I'm seeing on the educational side is that the schools that have for years now been doing a lot of things with flipped classrooms and blended learning have a tool set already in place that they're more or less comfortable with, and then they just have to adapt it to a new situation. The ones that have not been doing that are the ones that are in a much worse position right now to adapt, to instantly learn how to and ramp everything up to speed. So again, we're going to see what happens. Schools have just been closing like last week and this week, and there are a lot of spring breaks happening around now. So it probably won't be until sometime in April when we have a good sense of what the success or failure rate of these things is. But I do think it really highlights that notion that you've been saying specifically with archaeological tools, but I think you can, expand that to just about any kind of technological tool, and certainly under an unforeseen situation like what we're dealing with now.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to my observations of humanity, in that most people use what they need to use of a particular thing, right? I mean, even people that just drive their cars, like they don't probably know some of these more high-tech cars. I know somebody in particular that has a relatively new car, and it has cruise control with adaptive cruise control, so you can push the button and you push it 3 or 4 times to choose the distance you want to be from the car in front of you. And this person has literally no idea how to do that, and no concern with learning what that button on their steering wheel does, right? Just like no concern whatsoever. They just they paid an extra who knows how many dollars for this feature they didn't even know they were getting, and they simply don't know how to use it. And that goes down to, a lot of people, they just use the features that they think they need on a particular thing, and they're not curious enough to go say, well, yeah, but what does this do? I'm a button pusher, man. If there was a red button in front of me, it would be hard for me not to push it.
I'm old enough that you're talking about a red button, and I'm thinking of Ren and Stimpy with the history eraser button.
Exactly.
I'm imagining you just trying to hold yourself back from pressing that history eraser button just to see the shiny red button.
Exactly, man. I mean, that's who I am. I'm just a button pusher. I figure things out. I like to experiment. I have a feeling you're similar in a lot of ways. And those of us that are a little more techie, we like to figure stuff out and know how they work. I get a new application. I'm running that thing through the ringer and trying to figure it out. That's why people come to me for like iPhone tips and tricks, not because I'm smart. I don't know these things just offhand. I play with them. I push these buttons. I say, what does this do? What does that do? And I really experiment with it and I figure it out. And I enjoy doing that. So I think in circumstances like we're in now, people that are like that are better equipped to handle this sort of situation, because now they know some of the other capabilities of the things they're using every day and can adapt and overcome.
Yeah, that's actually a good point about the button pushing, because it really is that way for what we've been doing in terms of our own learning and training over the last few days, is just jumping in and trying to see how these things work. And, well, what's this button do? Hey, is there a way to do whatever? Quick Google it. Yeah, it looks like there is. It's a button over here. It's hidden underneath this widget, and we just experiment with it. But we now, because we're the techies, we have this quickly built up store of knowledge of how these things work, because we're not afraid to press all the buttons. But our teachers have now had 2 days of being able to get over that initial fear and trepidation they had, and then they ask the same questions, and we can answer pretty easily. Oh yeah, there's a button that you can press, and then they have the answer, and then they're much more at ease than they were 2 days ago. So that again, that's that difference between starting out a little early and letting you learn the tool set and everything before jumping in. I am, again, back to the colleges. I really do wonder what's going to happen with all the places that are currently on spring break and have decided that they're going to start remote learning beginning after spring break, which will leave the students pretty much no time at all to get used to their end of the tools. But that's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem.
I hear you. Why not put the tools out now so they can learn them? So
yeah.
Anyway, let's take a break, and we will come back and keep talking about this topic on the other side. Back in a second. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode. Welcome back to the zombie apocalypse. The Archaeotech 24. I love the title of the episode, by the way. Paul is to thank for that. But what we're going to talk about now is really some of the effects directly on archaeology and directly on CRM and your work life as you're going through this. Because what I heard just the other day was it took China about 2 months to get a handle on their numbers, was the phrase that was used. And really what that means is get a handle on the increase per day in the number of people infected with the virus, not necessarily deaths. I think that's a big concern, but more new infections are the bigger concern because that causes more transmission and then more deaths as related to the virus, of course. But so I think they said they took them about 2 months. And China's got some interesting living conditions for much of their country, especially the province where this happened. So it's possible that other countries could take a less amount of time and other countries could take more amount of time, depending on the measures that they take. But China also is a communist country. They have a lot more governmental control over their people, and they instituted a lot more very severe practices that I'm not sure many Americans would be too happy about right away. And so because of that, I think it's going to take longer here. I think it's going to spread super fast, just from the reports I've heard, and I think it's going to impact a lot more people. They said 20,000 people have died in the past 6 months or past year, or whatever it was, from the flu, right? And that has a 0.1% mortality rate, whereas this has a 10 times higher mortality rate. So potentially, what is that? 200 million people could be impacted by this pretty negatively. And that's huge. And that's why the drastic measures are being taken. And so looking at the impacts on archaeology, I mean, we could be closing our borders to everyone here soon, the United States, which wouldn't impact archaeology in this country that much. But what I'm wondering is, will states start closing their borders? Can they even do that? I mean, how hard would that be to do with all the different roads in? And if states started doing that from an individual state level, California could do it super easy because there's already guard shacks at every entrance into the country because of agriculture. And I've always thought that's just so California can secede from the Union easier. But who knows? But other countries, other states, if they do that, if they start restricting travel like that between states, like interstate travel and just blocking off interstates to try to prevent the spread, that is going to shut down archaeology. Now, in bigger states like Texas and California and Florida, where people just work in those states, maybe not as much. But in other states, I was just talking to a potential client for WildNote today. They work in like 5 Midwest states. That's their bread and butter.
I don't think states can do that unilaterally. I think that interstate commerce has to be controlled by the federal government. I'm not a lawyer.
There's a lot of things I didn't think the president can do, but that's been proven.
Right. Well, that's I was having a conversation about this is before coronavirus became a big thing in the U.S., but it was definitely a big thing in China at the time. So a few weeks ago, I was having a talk with a friend of mine who used to be a high-powered lawyer, and we were talking about law, and he was saying, well, it's really just kind of finding rules that you can adapt to what you wanted to do anyhow and justifying things ex post facto. So I suppose if there's a full-blown pandemic panic happening about the spread of the disease, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tried to close borders, state borders, and deal with the fallout afterwards.
Right.
But that's just one aspect of it. I mean, you were telling me when we first opened up our call today that the SAAs have been canceled now.
Yeah, they just put out the notice today. They put a note out 2 days ago that said they were looking into it and they were assessing their options because the city of Austin, Texas, where the SAAs are going to be held, declared, I think it was a week or so ago, that no gatherings over 2,500 people will be allowed until May 1st at the very least, unless they change that, unless they had a mitigation plan for dealing with the virus, right? And the SAAs put out a message right after that said, well, we're going to be evaluating this by Friday, and we should have a note for you Friday this week, which would be the 13th, Friday the 13th.
Oh, nice.
I know, right? But they came out with the message today, basically in response to what Trump did yesterday, which is close all European borders.
Right.
So, or all European.
Well,
and there's a lot of people that come over from Europe.
Asterisk on that, but yes.
Yeah, except for places where he has golf resorts.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And the UK, which is where my daughter's vacationing. So
exactly. So maybe it's good for her. So anyway, Yeah, I mean that's a huge impact, closing the SAAs, closing universities, things like that. But when it comes down to straight up field work, I think the biggest concerns for archaeologists from a fieldwork standpoint are really the living conditions that archaeologists are typically in. A lot of companies in the Midwest and in the Southeast will do double occupancy. I would seriously think that that's going to change, and people are going to have their own hotel rooms. I would hope that's the case. All you company owners listening, please do that. But of course, that's going to impact projects, right? That's going to impact costs. That's going to double your cost to your project because now you have to pay for twice as many hotel rooms, and that's going to change bidding. We might not even be able to do that right now because these projects may have been bid on and won months ago, right? But now they're just being started to do the field work. So it's hard to say what impacts those will have. And then with the downturn in the economy as a result of all these fears, maybe some projects are being put on hold and canceled. Who knows? If they're paid for already, maybe they're still going on. I mean, who knows? The lasting impacts of this are still yet to be felt.
Yeah, well, I'm coming at it, you come at archaeology from the CRM point of view. I come at it from the academic archaeology point of view. And if all these schools, universities and colleges that have excavations that they run in the summer, well, I'd be pretty sure that none of them are going to be doing their field work in Italy this summer. Right. I can imagine that a lot of these are going to be shut down because of the difficulties of travel, but also the difficulties of the planning and the organization that happens. Sometimes at universities, the field work that happens in the summer is kind of the end result of a class that you have to take in the spring semester. Well, if the class is now being moved online, deferred, canceled, whatever happens in order to keep the spread of the virus in check, can they then legitimately have the field work afterwards? I've got the feeling that it's going to be one of those times where a lot of projects decide to put their field work on hold and then turn things into study seasons.
Yeah. And, the other problem tied to that is we don't have a world government that has any power that is saying, everybody close your borders and let's deal with this together right now. Every country is individually assessing this as they get new cases, which I think is the worst policy. If you're going to close your borders and just decide to deal with it internally and restrict travel, which, to be honest, is probably the best policy if this is really going to be as bad as they say it is, then everybody should just be doing that, whether they have a lot of cases there or not, rather than waiting until it's a problem. And because they're not, this is going to be a ripple effect. And a lot of the countries where people are doing field work, they might not be closing their borders until June, and then they're closed for the summer, and then no field work is going to take place. Travel will be restricted, of course, by the universities, and they just won't let people go there, of course, if there's a health crisis going on, regardless of whether the country has closed their borders. My company's restricted travel, and they're in Australia. They said no. They said, I don't care where you're going worldwide, no more client meetings until we say so.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's it. And we're a health and safety company. So, yeah.
My wife, who I've mentioned before, works at the Met Museum here in New York, and she just informed me an hour ago that the Met is closing their doors at the end of the day today for visitors, and staff will be able to come in there until like noon tomorrow to pick up their stuff. I don't know how long it's going to be closed, but that's not directly archaeology, but there is a lot of archaeology that's displayed in the museum there. This is going to affect museums all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to affecting the economy. The economy has a dramatic impact on archaeology. We saw a real slowdown in projects during the 2008 economic downturn. And that was more related to construction and housing and stuff like that, which has an even greater impact on archaeology. But the ripple effects of this whole thing, I mean, I really don't know, what we're going to see with all that. I'm glad the project I've got starting on Saturday is a government project because they always have money. But it's hard to say with all the private development projects and things like that around the country where that's going to go and whether or not they're going to put things on hold. Then you got weird stuff that are just unintended consequences, like people buying up all the toilet paper. Yeah, I saw another picture on Facebook that was seen at Jared Jewelers or whatever, that big national chain down in Las Vegas. They had a roll of toilet paper with gold ribbon around it, and it said $3,999. Includes a free 1-carat diamond ring.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I hope that was real.
Yeah, the toilet paper one, there have been all sorts of Twitter threads going on about that. It's like, what is it with the toilet paper? I get the run on hand sanitizer, even though it's a little on the hysterical side. I get the run on different cleaning supplies, but toilet paper? Yeah. And so one person told me, they heard that it's because people have been hearing that it's all made in China and therefore it won't be imported anymore, which I don't believe is remotely true. Somebody else told me that it's a kind of a confusion of that idea with the toilet paper manufacturer that supplied most of Wuhan province switched over the production from toilet paper to masks, and therefore there was a shortage there. I don't know if that's true or not. I have no way of assessing that. Other people are thinking that, because we confuse the flu with stomach bugs every winter, that people are confusing coronavirus with what they think the flu is, which is already confused. And so they expect that if you get coronavirus, rather than like having trouble breathing and coughing a lot, you're going to be stuck on the toilet the whole time. And I'm sure there's, at a certain point, you get a bunch of just profiteers who figure they can go, spend $1,000 and buy up a whole stock of Target's toilet paper and then sell it at a hefty profit to their neighbors. Sure. And then once you start getting those, you get other people who have to go and buy, a month's supply beforehand, just in case somebody else tries to undercut them. So I don't know. That's for the economists to look at, not for me. But it's really a bizarre consequence of it. But all these little things that kind of interact in funny ways, they're definitely going to have an effect. And, if anybody tells you what they know what the effect is, they're probably lying. They're overconfident. But I there's no way that this will not have an effect on archaeological research through the spring, certainly. And at this point, I would be surprised if it didn't have it at least into the summer.
Right.
And like I said, things that have to be planned in the springtime, travel abroad, field schools, permits for foreign workers in any part of the world that you're doing archaeology. That's not happening right now, and that means that professors and project managers and such are going to write off their summer projects and try to figure out some other way of keeping busy during that time.
Yeah, well, and I have seen some positive effects too, which are mostly financial, but some of the positive effects are, when we're talking about some of these travel and support industries for travel, they're going to be seriously hurt by this, because the first thing people are doing, I mean, when I saw that SAA message today, I canceled my plane ticket and I canceled my Airbnb. And the Society for California Archaeology was supposed to be this week, and we found out on Saturday that they canceled it. They canceled it at the last minute. And I actually lost money on my Airbnb because every Airbnb host, and this is good to know, if you're planning on a conference that's during this virus period, probably going to get canceled, but maybe your conference is in June or something and you're hoping it doesn't, because there's a lot of regional conferences that happen near the end of the year here, getting up into the summer field season. But if you haven't bought lodging and you still think you're going to, and you're going to do Airbnb, look at the cancellation policy, because it's different for every unit. The host decides what that is. There's certain fees they have to give back, like Airbnb fees and stuff like that. But this particular host, for the one in California, they basically said, listen, there's no refund on your actual room nights. You can get your cleaning fee back and your service fee back, but your room nights, there's no refund if it's less than 5 days to the hour that you're supposed to check in. Ugh. And I immediately canceled the Airbnb when I saw the email come through from the SAA, and it was 5 hours past the deadline. So now I've got messages into him say, hey, extenuating circumstances, everybody's doing this, can you refund me? But I'm probably out $250. And then the one I just canceled in Austin today, well outside of the cancellation policy, but their policy is, I don't care when you cancel, if it's within 48 hours, we'll give you all your money back. If it's after that and before, I think 3 days before the event, you get 50% back. And that's just what they decided to do. And there's nothing you can really do about it. You agree to that the minute you sign up for it. And to be honest, I've never canceled an Airbnb, and I've never thought about the cancellation policy. And I am now. So, it's something to think about. But then also things like gas is cheaper right now, because there's other circumstances with why gas is cheaper. There's a bunch of oil companies having an argument, but hotels are
a bunch of oil countries having an argument.
Sorry, oil countries. You're right. So gas is cheaper for transportation. That's good. I'm about ready to start a field work and I'm looking forward to paying $2 a gallon for gas. Hotels are cheaper because people are canceling reservations and they need to fill their hotels. Airline flights are cheaper because they're trying to pack them in and get people to travel more. So, maybe now's the time for some of that if you're within an area that isn't, highly impacted by it. But it could be good for archaeology from a project budget standpoint.
Yeah, might be. But again, you got to have a project to have a project budget, huh?
That's true.
I want to wrap up. We've got a couple minutes left, so this will just be brief, but bring it back. We touched a little bit on the archaeology there. Let's jump back a little bit to tech. You've been working kind of officeless for quite a while. I obviously work in a set place with set hours, more or less, and set seasonal schedule. But we've had to use, for a long time, both of us have used a variety of different kinds of tools in order to keep in touch, do our work. Do you have anything in particular that you've had to change in terms of the tool set, or something that you've had to adopt more of in the last week or so than you did previously? Or is there anything that you foresee using more of going forward if this virus becomes more serious?
Honestly, like you said, no, my life hasn't changed much aside from the fact that this co-working facility might close. If that happens, I'm just going to go back to working at home. But I worked at home for the first 4 years. I was an entrepreneur and a business owner. So, and I have nearly everything at home that I do here. So, and coincidentally, I'm going on field work for 2 weeks, and my wife and I have not canceled our trip to Mexico yet. We're still kind of hedging our bets on that one.
Wow.
So we might be going straight to that. Yeah, it's I'm going to be spending some time away regardless. So working remotely is what I do. We went and looked at RVs yesterday, and we were planning on full-time working remotely. So I've been preparing for this for like 8 years. And the only difference I've noticed is in the people I'm talking to. A lot of the people I'm talking to are, we get on a Zoom call with a client or something like that. And a lot of times on the client's end, they'll have a whole bunch of people in a conference room, and it's really difficult to hear them because they're on either a good or a crappy, laptop microphone, or maybe they've got one of those conference room speakers or microphones and you can sort of hear everybody. But now everybody's at home and I can hear them way better. So it's actually good for me because they've all got their own microphones and it's more stable that way. But one of the interesting things about that is people don't realize what their backgrounds are. When they're at work, they don't really care. When they're at home, it's like, maybe you ought to clean up behind you a little bit if you're going to have a client meeting at home. Maybe you should think about your surroundings and your children running around screaming and all the other things happening around you when you have to work at home. Just let that run through your head for a second before you just jump on a Zoom call.
Well, Zoom fortunately does have the ability to put a backdrop behind you. So So
yeah, and Microsoft Teams or Skype has the ability to blur your background, which is super cool.
Right.
All right. Well, I don't know if we're going to do an app of the day segment this week. We'll talk about it, and I'll delete this portion if we are. But let's take a break right now and come back on the other side and wrap up this discussion about working remotely.
All right.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show. Welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 124, and we are talking about the zombie apocalypse that everyone is talking about, that you're probably deep in the midst of if you downloaded this in real time. If not, and you're hearing this in the future, then you survived it. Good job.
Hey, go you.
Way to, I know, right? Hey, yay, Darwinism.
Yeah, now you get to help us fight the robots.
That's right. The Roombas took over after we left. Yeah. So we are going to mention an app at the end of this segment, but let's wrap up this discussion on the zombie apocalypse and what we're doing to mitigate this.
Mitigate it?
Well,
deal with
mitigate
it.
the effect on our lives. Yeah.
Scramble to try to figure out what the new normal is going to be for the next few weeks or months.
Yeah, indeed. And if I'll make one mention, if you do still have to do travel, and maybe it's internally within the country here, or it's to a country where you're allowed to travel, I think you can allay your fears a little bit. I mean, obviously people are still people and they're still going to breathe on you. So there's not a whole lot you can do about that except keep yourself clean and, use the disinfectants. But I watched a message from American Airlines this morning and they were mentioning some of the tech within their airplanes. And take it for what it is. It was the CEO talking. Who knows what kind of spin they're trying to put on this, but they did say that, and I know this is true for at least some airplanes. I don't know about all of them, but I've heard some fear-mongering reports about like not having even the air blowing down on you in the airplane because it's just recycled throughout the entire airplane. But what they did say was the filters within an airplane, just by regulation, before this even happened, actually recycle the air 2 to 3 times every few minutes throughout the entire airplane. It's basically brand new air from the outside, and it comes in, goes through the filters, and then, ejects out. It's sealed up from a pressurization standpoint, but there are through holes and things like that, because if there weren't, there'd be serious problems. But even if the thing were completely sealed up like a submarine, they're not just breathing their own diseased air all the time. Do you know how many people will be sick on a submarine 2 weeks after it went underwater? I mean, these air recyclers clean out everything, and it does it frequently and persistently and all the time. And these big fancy jets, maybe not your small Cessna, but these big jets, they have those types of air recyclers just for basic health and safety reasons, and they've had them for decades.
Well,
so,
if you're flying a Cessna, you're probably not too worried about getting disease from the other passenger that's in there with you.
Right. Hopefully not. Yeah. But yeah, just talking about using your brain and thinking like a scientist, and really analyzing and doing your research on which ones of these things are impacting your lives from a work standpoint or a travel standpoint, or my wife and I went out for dinner last night and it was packed. We weren't too worried about it. We take measures, we clean or wash our hands with disinfectant when we get home, stuff like that. So it was good sushi. I'm glad we went. Yeah. Anyway, should we talk about some of the apps directly, Paul, that we wanted to talk about?
I did want to mention that, we're kind of hijacking the App of the Day segment here, just like we hijacked the entire episode, but that's fine. Again, we've been having all sorts of video conferences with teachers, trying to get them, they have a good knowledge of the different tools that they've used, online tools, online resources, things that they use for blended learning. But what they were most concerned about was the things about telepresence, because that's not something that most of them have done regularly. Because at the K through 12 level, you're not normally doing remote learning. It's probably much more prevalent in colleges and universities. So we experimented with a bunch of different ones. And one thing that our listeners probably already know, because they're a tech savvy bunch, but just to be clear, that the big telepresence platforms, things like Skype and Zoom and Google Meet and MS Teams, all have mobile apps. So I've had meetings with teachers while they're on their phones or on their iPads, and it's worked great. Sometimes these apps, depending on which one you're looking at, aren't quite as fully featured as the desktop equivalent, but it does open up possibilities for how people could connect, and that's been important actually in a few places where we have teachers who don't have home internet access. They do, however, have a cell phone, and they can pop on the cell phone, download the Zoom app, and Zoom into the conference call that we're all getting, and that's worked great. So be aware that you don't necessarily have to be tied to your full suite of your heaviest equipment. You can do a lot of these things remotely, or even on the go on your phone. And tied to that, I did want to put in a little bit of a plug for it. This would work the same regardless of them, but Google Meet I found extremely easy to use. And so I started using it for tech support. I fire up a Google Meet, and I send somebody the link and I say, log in and now show me your screen. And they show me their screen. I haven't had to install anything on their computer. And then I can say, okay, you see up in the menu bar, click on this, click over there, that button on the right, click that. And I step them through a few things without doing any kind of installation. It's not as great as having full control of the computer, but as an ad hoc, last minute, on the go kind of way of providing tech support, that's been really useful to me, and that extends beyond just the work at the school, but has also been helpful now that I've gotten comfortable with it with family. Because again, I'm sure you, Chris, are often the go-to guy for tech support for family members, as am I, and probably a lot of our listeners as well. Yeah. And it's extremely frustrating to talk your mom through finding the right menu when you're on the phone. So now at least I can look directly at her computer screen and say, nope, up a little more, that one, yes, click there.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got a lot of great tools for remote support. I got to tell you, and they're not that hard to learn. If somebody's never used some of these video conferencing tools or even remote connect tools, then it's not that difficult if you've got somebody on the other end that knows what they're doing. I mean, that's literally what I do for a living. Practically is talk people through how to use a system, whether it's WildNote or DoneSafe, the other company I'm working for. That is what I do. I do screen shares probably 5 to 6 hours a day, most days, where I'm just showing somebody how to do something and talking them through it. So again, this is like I'm designed for this sort of atmosphere. The only challenging thing, like I mentioned earlier, was all our travel's been canceled, and sometimes the face-to-face really helps out.
True.
Really helps out with an implementation and onboarding standpoint, just to be at a company's physical location for 3 or 4 days and really just work with them solid. And all of that's been canceled until further notice. So we'll see. We'll just have to keep doing things remotely, and it might take a little longer, but at least we can do it. So,
yeah, no, I just wanted our listeners to be aware that if it's something that you do infrequently or with, a variety of family members and other people, that some of these tools are so easy to use right now and require no extra installation of anything. And that for me is a huge boon. I mean, if you're doing this professionally, then you want to be able to squeeze all the features out of whatever product. And some of these are very, very fully featured. But, for something very simple, it's doable now in a way that it wasn't even a few years ago.
Yeah. So one thing else to remember about these apps is nearly all of them require you to download some sort of software. And if you're using, say, Skype or even Zoom or something like that, but a lot of people have Skype on their computer, it probably hasn't updated if you haven't used it in a long time. So if you're planning on getting a call at 3 p.m., don't turn your computer on at 2:58 and turn on Skype and expect to make that call at 3 p.m. Turn your computer on a half an hour before that. Turn on Skype, let it do its update, and then let Windows do its update. And that way you're on call at the right time. That is proper remote working. People think about being late for a physical meeting, and most people are concerned with that. A lot of people are not, to be honest, but most people are concerned with getting there on time, not being late for an appointment, stuff like that. You have a doctor's appointment, a client appointment, whatever it is. They're like, oh, I've got to be on time for this, right? But people don't give it a second thought being late for a digital meeting. And from somebody who does digital meetings all day long, every single day, do you know how many people are just 5, 6, 7 minutes late because they're like, oh, I turned my computer on, I had a bunch of updates to do? I was like, I hear that from you literally every week. It's like, let's get a little more professional about this, and let's do it the right way, and make sure your computer's ready to go for the day, just like you'd make sure yourself is ready to go. Turn on all the software you're going to need, make sure it's updated, make sure it's going to work, and show up to your meetings on time. Right.
And that's another way of saying, I mean, from your point of view, what I started out saying about having the extra couple days of trying to learn the ropes, getting everybody comfortable with the tool set beforehand, rather than what I'm worried that a lot of schools are doing is that they're going to get back at the end of spring break and expect everything to be running while students have no idea what they're supposed to be doing. We'll see. Hopefully it's not as bad as I fear, but I feel much better now that we had those couple extra days. And again, what you just said, Chris, do your updates before you try to open up that call. Restart your computer at the very least before you try to open that call, because restarting cures just about all ills on computers nowadays.
Indeed. Or tablets, even, for that matter.
True.
If you're doing it from a tablet or phone. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I do have, I thought about this and it's in my notes. It really is kind of an app update. Paul, you have an app update as well?
Yeah, why don't you go first? Mine is not so much an app, but it's a follow-up on something that I talked about on a previous episode.
No problem. Well, mine sort of is both as well. And it's just because I was thinking about it. But Stash, I've talked about Stash, the investment application, before. And everybody knows that's listening to this in real time that the stock market is in free fall, right? Like, it's dropped more than it has in, I don't know how many years, but a long time. And if not ever. And it's just, everything is crashing. I have a retirement account. It's a small one because I just started it last year in this particular application. I have others, but in Stash, I started a new retirement account plus just a stock investing account. And Stash recently made it so you can invest at any level. You can invest a penny if you want. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to do that, but they basically removed all restrictions and you can do that. And it only costs you about $2 a month to have your Stash account and do your regular trades. So it's totally worth it. But I'm telling you this because two things are going to happen to the economy as a result. One of two things is going to happen to the economy as a result of this massive action, this worldwide action in the coronavirus. either there's going to be an apocalypse and not very many people are left. And in that case, who cares about the economy? Your money's worthless anyway. So that could happen. Or what's more likely to happen is all this will bounce back up. Most companies will survive, at least the big ones you would invest in. They're going to survive, and all the stocks are going to come back up. All those people freaking out in 2008, their stocks are worth 10 times that amount now. If they had just waited and held on, the ones that had the ability to do that, then there wouldn't have been any crisis, right? Mm-hmm. So now is the time to take that little money that you have as a field technician or somebody in archaeology or whatever, even in academia, nobody's paid a lot of money here, and invest. Yeah, invest while these stocks are low. My investment account is negative $800 on the return right now, and it was up like, $3,000 or $4,000 just a week and a half ago. So, but I don't care. It's not like I'm pulling that money out today, right? I still have the base amount of money that I put in there. Well, I don't. It's minus 800 from what I put in there, but now is the time to throw a bunch of money into the long-term stuff, not the volatile stuff, but into the long-term safe stuff, because it's going to go back up. And like I said, if it doesn't go back up, well, we're all living under bridges with, 50-gallon barrels with fires in them, and the economy's tanked anyway. So what's the difference? But I think let's hedge our bets and think the economy is going to go back up. And if you have even $20 or $50 to throw into a stock that something well-known, something is going to be around, and just throw it in there. What do you got to lose? It's probably going to double itself in the next 2 months. So there you go.
Wow. Well, after that, mine sounds kind of minor. Yeah, I'm not telling anybody how to live their lives. What I'm saying is that, so I've mentioned before Microsoft Visual Studio Code, which is easily my favorite text editor I've ever used. I've been using it for a few years now, and it just keeps getting better and better. I was just updating code on my personal computer, and I realized it had gone up to version 1.4.3 or 1.43. I should have written that down better. And looking to see what they'd announced as new features, and one of them is a preview of setting sync that's going to come out on the next version, 1.44. And I'm bringing this up because back in episode 111, I talked about an extension for Visual Studio Code called Setting Sync by one Sean Kahn that I talked up. It was really great because it allowed me to keep all my workspace preferences in sync between my work machine, my personal machine, and another one that I use on occasion. It was a bit funky to set up, but it worked. And it's been very helpful to me, but it looks like now Microsoft has taken that idea and actually rolled it into the core of their product. And that makes me very, very happy. And if you use Visual Studio Code and weren't doing setting sync, you'll probably like this too. And hopefully it makes you happy.
Nice. Well, there
and
you
should use it. There. Now I told them how to live their lives.
Hey, let me give a disclaimer here. I am not a stock professional, and I'm not providing financial advice. I just need to get that down on the recording. I was just at a podcast conference this last weekend, and I was actually talking to a few people who do financial podcasts, and somebody asked them a question. They were like, can you do that? Like I was talking about, because I have a client that wanted to interview somebody in finance, and they said that they couldn't do it because their company wouldn't let them. They wouldn't talk about anything. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, but if you just don't give stock advice, wouldn't that be okay? And they're like, yeah, generally, but they just have this blanket, no stocks, no advice policy. Yeah. So no anything. But so I'll say that right now, I am not giving stock advice. Keep your money. Don't do what I said with it. Do what you want to do. But, rewind 5 minutes and then do that. So there you go. All right. Well, I think that's it for this week. Hopefully our guest lineup for the next month and a half is not negatively impacted by the coronavirus, and the internet will still stay running, and we can get those interviews in because we have a lot of good stuff coming up.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's a shame we didn't get that interview, but I hope that we get that one rescheduled before too long.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we will. It was timely, so I'm a little disappointed about that, but it will still be a good interview to have in the future about something that is more than likely happening in the past. So anyway, more info on that later. I don't want to say too much about it because we don't have the interview. So if you are interested in being interviewed on the Archaeotech podcast about your project and what you're doing, contact me, Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com, and we'll get you on here. We've got a nice link right on the website at arcpodnet.com/archaeotech. It says schedule an interview. And now that we've gotten into this period a little bit where we had some interviews scheduled, there should be some openings in early May for interviews. Right now we're booked out through the end of April, and we've got one in June. So we're doing pretty good, but we could always use some more, and we could just get them in the pipeline. And also, I'll use this opportunity as the first time I'm saying this. With the SCA canceled in California and the SAA canceled and probably other regional conferences canceled, I'm trying to figure out a way to keep my sanity and yet still give people the opportunity to present their data and their research, at the very least in a podcast, even if they're just reading their paper. I'm trying to figure out a way to make a schedule where people can come in for 30 minutes, read their paper. I record it with very little editing, except for, stumbling over your words and things like that, and then release those in a special channel. We already have a conferences channel on the Archaeology Podcast Network, and I might just release them there, but I've got to figure out a mechanism for doing that. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in doing, give me some feedback. You can hit me up on Twitter or with my email again, Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com, and let me know if that would be something you are interested in, because I'll probably be trying to nail that down in the next couple of weeks here and get something on the books. So, all right.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And everything will change by the time we have our next one, if recent history is anything to go by.
That's right. The world may have ended by the time this releases anyway, so who knows? Anyway, All right. Well, thanks a lot, Paul, and thanks everybody else.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your zombie apocalypse.
That's right. We'll see you virtually sometime in the future. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.arcpodnet.com/archaeotech. Contact us at Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and Paul at lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at arcpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.
College Savings Iowa is now iSave529, and it can do more than take your child to college. It's their passport to a bright future, because funds can be used for K-12 tuition, trade schools, graduate degrees, books, and everything they need to get anywhere they want to go. Register by September 30th at iowa529contest.com for a chance to win a $5,290 contribution. iSave529, for every child, for any adventure.